Hello and welcome to Stalwarts of Music with Aditya Veera. Today's episode is powered by Perpetual Bus Experiences. They are an artist representation company with two very basic but lofty goals. They're the launchpad for artists, helping them leverage success in the best possible manner. They help fund social causes and make sure that people have a good time throughout the process. So be sure to check them out on www.perpetualbus.com. Today's guest is none other than Tracy Bonham, a two-time Grammy nominee. She's a musical chameleon who has journeyed from classical virtuosity to alt-rock stardom. Her debut album, The Burdens of Being Upright, struck gold with the powerful anthem Mother, Mother, resonating with the disenfranchised youth worldwide. Despite industry turbulence, Tracy evolved her approach and artistry, delivering heartfelt songs of resilience and love in Blink the Brightest. Her passion and talent led her to unexpected arenas, both musically and literally, as she wowed audiences with the Blumen Group and self-funded her path to success. She's a trailblazer. She continued to captivate newer audiences with her quirky humor and mature songwriting in Masts of Manhatta and beyond. But Tracy's creativity knows no bounds in the face of the pandemic. She embraced a lot of change, creating the Melodeon Music House to inspire and educate a younger generation through music. Tracy Bonham, a dynamic artist forever, evolves and makes sure that she wins hearts of everyone who listens to her. So without any further ado, I'm delighted to welcome my guest for today, Tracy Bonham.
Shine, shine, shimmer and you shine. Shine, shine, shimmer and you shine. Shimmer and you shine. Shimmer and you shine. Hi, I'm Tracy Bonham, and I'm so excited to be here with all of you beautiful people and here on Stalwarts of Music with Aditya Veera.
Great. So thank you so much, Tracy, for tuning in, taking the time out at this early hour, and welcome to Stalwarts of Music.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Which part of the world are you in? I see you have a very pretty fireplace right behind you.
Yeah, I'm in an old cabin that's been turned into a house in Woodstock, New York.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what's happening? What's going on in Woodstock right now?
Well, there's a lot of new things happening in Woodstock. Woodstock, New York is known for, resurgence in the, late 60s, early 70s. And it was supposed to be the location for the Woodstock Festival in '69.
Yeah.
They had to move it because they didn't have the right permits for the town. So they just moved it, but they still called it Woodstock. And so with that, and with Bob Dylan living here and his band, The Band, living here, it created this place where a lot of artists would come up. Janis Joplin, actually, I'll tell you, in this house, the very house I'm sitting in, was a recording studio and a rehearsal space that was built up by the founder of Woodstock.
Oh, lovely.
And so people, there's spirits and energies from Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and then even up to more modern days, it turned into a music studio called Applehead, which you can look at. You can see all sorts of artists have recorded here in this house. And I believe what I'm sitting in is what used to be just maybe the loft bed where the artists could stay, and there's a little kitchen back there. But the rest of the house is so open and beautiful. Never meant to be a house because it was originally a dance hall back in before the turn of the century, 1900s. So yeah, great.
It's such a great place to be living in, such an iconic place as you mentioned. And I see a lot of, I see a photograph of like of a dance ball
Yeah,
happening. Yeah,
that is.
yeah, that one.
It's Johnny Cash and June Carter,
Uh-huh.
as he's a great shot because it's at the end of a show, and you
Okay.
can see him coming out to take her bow. It's really sweet.
Marvelous, marvelous.
I
That's
do want to
just
say though is that I do also I really live in Brooklyn, New York.
okay. All right.
Yeah. Mhm.
Lovely. So before we get started, I have a couple of interesting questions coming your way. But I'd like to start this conversation by asking you a very basic question. So, what was your earliest musical memory?
Okay. Oh, I have so many of them. I was surrounded by music from, you know, early childhood.
Mhm.
So I think my first musical memory would be with my grandfather.
Mhm.
His name was Ralph Leach. We called him Dan Dan because my sister couldn't pronounce granddad or grandpa. So
Okay.
Dan Dan was a self-taught musician. He played many instruments. Trumpet, I think, was his instrument.
Mhm.
Um, Clarinet. He just loved music so much. He wanted to be a musician, but what his job was a deputy sheriff in the
Oh,
town.
okay.
Yeah, it's amazing. The town of Ashland, Oregon. But he was a musician, at night, and he would play New Year's Eve parties,
Yeah.
and he just loved music everywhere. So I heard that kind of music especially. And then it was passed on to my mother,
Mhm.
his daughter, and then she was a musician. She actually was a singer at the Shakespearean Festival in Ashland, Oregon, and then she became a music educator. She was constantly in theater productions, and that was just my world. I knew from that moment, which would probably be age 4, that I
Wow.
really could see myself doing this. Yeah,
So, from what it seems like, music was always running in the blood.
absolutely true.
So did that give you like an upper hand in terms of picking it up and taking the tradition forward?
Well, yes, in ways that are more kind of like spiritually based, where I just feel so fortunate that I knew what I wanted to do and I had a purpose in life.
Okay.
And so they did give me an upper hand because there was no doubt it was, and it was going to be either, musical theater at one point, piano,
Mhm.
maybe violin, a future in singing. It was jazz, R&B, anything. But I knew that those were my options and there was no veering from them.
Okay. I'm sure while growing up, there would have been a series of experiments
Oh,
with
yeah.
music, right? As a little inquisitive girl. At what point did you realize your experiments were morphing into full-fledged musical compositions?
Oh, cool. Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. I was very curious and I love music and I was pretty good at it. So, I had the classical
Mhm.
from piano and violin. That was always going to stay with me. I knew that.
Okay.
I started to play guitar self-taught. I'm not very good on the guitar, but I have a thing. That's what they say.
Uh-huh.
So I did start writing songs after, a long time. I started late, like maybe when I was 24,
Mhm.
writing songs. I had written compositions in college. I went to conservatory. I wrote
Right.
classical stuff and I tried my hand. I had a little 4-track cassette thing.
Okay.
But really, when it became like, I'm going to actually write a song. And here's what I did. The first thing, I sat down on the guitar, which is not my first instrument.
Right.
And I had a friend who said, just take 3 chords, the easy chords that I know, the open chords. It was probably like E, A, and, D or something. And he
Okay.
said, I want you to write a song just with those 3 chords. And
Mm.
for me, I loved that challenge because I've been classically trained and I kind of feel like, oh, I'm accomplished, but when I was young, but then having that simple, very simple, back to the basics effort to write a song was really pivotal for me because
Okay.
then I did write a song. It was terrible, whatever. It didn't matter though. I just completed it. And then I started to write more. And then I did have a very tiny body of work. And Mother, Mother, my song that, was my hit song, was really one of the first songs I had actually completed as well. So for me to have success on that was startling, because then I had to actually write more to keep up with my fame.
Very interesting. You from what I gathered, you pursued your music industry degree at Berkeley, if I'm not mistaken. Was it Berkeley University?
I did transfer from University of Southern California, where I played classical in the conservatory, to Berkeley.
Berkeley, yeah.
And
so could you tell us a little bit about the degree that you pursued in Berkeley School of Music?
Well, I was not pursuing a degree. I just wanted to sing.
Okay.
I really did. And I wanted to sing jazz. I was still dabbling in R&B, but I wasn't fitting in the classical world. It was so, I loved it so much. I love the music, but in order for me to really truly feel like I could express myself, I wanted to expand. I was always expressive on the violin, but they would always give me bad marks or something for my technique or something. So I did go to Berkeley because I had a friend going there, and it was, a very good reputation. And I studied voice. And I did a lot of ear training, which Berkeley, I have to say, with modern music, jazz and pop and rock and everything, the musical theory in that world was really, really a great lesson.
So this was more of a program, a tailored program that you enrolled for at Berkeley?
No, this was in 87, and there wasn't an actual curriculum or program I signed up for. I did sign up to be a vocal major.
Okay.
But Berkeley was interesting because the first year I went there, they didn't allow me to choose the major. And I don't really understand why. They did that with a lot of vocalists. I'm not sure why, but I spent time playing the violin and stuff and singing. And then I dropped out after a year because I was already I had gigs and stuff.
All right. You don so many different hats. You play the violin, you can play the guitar, the piano, you can sing, and you're also an equally accomplished musical educator. So what is the most preferred hat out of all these?
I guess if I could just whittle it down to two, this is my dream. I would still continue to make music as Tracy Bonham, and my writing would get better, and my musicianship would get better, and people would want to come hear my songs and be moved by them. And maybe earlier in the day or something, I could do workshops with my music education program called Melodeon. I could do, and then also have this business called Melodeon that would possibly be maybe licensed for schools, because for music education, because it has a completely different slant than the traditional music education that I see in public schools here mostly.
As you rightly mentioned, your songs and your songwriting is impeccable, right? So some of your songs like Mother, Mother, Tell It to the Sky are often praised for how honest they are and the emotional depth they carry. Right? So how do you find the courage to open up and share personal experiences in your songs? And what roles does vulnerability play in this form of artistic expression for you?
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. Now I look back in retrospect, I think, wow, well, I think the reason why I could open up so much in song and lyrics and my musical expression is honestly because I grew up having a hard time expressing myself in real life and being my authentic self, because there's a lot of pressure, and you grow up with this or that challenge. And I had a wonderful childhood, but I also had a strike against me very, very early on.
Okay.
And so it was hard. I tried to please people, be something else for people.
So, how did what was like the first step that you took to sort of express yourself freely? How did you go about that? Yeah.
Well, so there was this rub. I was expressing myself as freely as I could with my violin in the conservatory. But again,
Okay.
I always kept these like, you got to stay in this box. You can't go further. I love your expression, but it's supposed to sound like this. And so that was the rub. I was thinking, well, that doesn't feel really like me, you know? I can practice all day and I love it, but I don't want to be in that box. So the first time I actually felt like I could really, truly express myself was when I moved out of the classical world. I put it on the back burner. And then I started to open up my, just the perspective I had was like, okay, now anything goes. I know enough. I can try this and see who I am musically and how my heart's going to be expressed the best. So I would say it was that time moving from like one college to the next, but I really didn't start like really getting it until I sat down with this guitar. And it was 1992 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
And it really became like, I know why this guitar, or not this one particularly, but the guitar was not my my forte. And
Okay.
still to this day, and I'm kind of proud to say this, is that I honestly I don't really know all the frets because they all look the same to me. I know there's helpers, there's dots, but I chose that. I chose it because I didn't want to know technique and where my finger goes
Right.
and what the minor third is or whatever. I just wanted to play with my ear.
Okay.
And my fingers went anywhere that my ear wanted to go. And that's when I started to culminate my sound and my songwriting. I didn't want it to be structured. There's no way I can teach songwriting, I've figured out, because I don't do the formula and I don't want to.
Yeah.
I've done that. So it's been very exciting and also very hard to describe.
As you rightly mentioned, you've taken a lot of routes and by routes to reach your end goal as a musician and to express yourself in an unconventional way. You figured your own path to musical expression, which is very commendable, I must say.
Thank you. Appreciate that. It's still happening. I'm still learning and growing,
Yeah,
finding.
yeah. I know. It's a never-ending journey, being in this realm, for sure. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So reflecting on your commercially successful years, which were probably in the mid and late 90s, how do you feel about that period of your career at this point? And how has your perspective on success in the music industry changed over time?
Well, yeah, I was thrust into the limelight very, very quickly in the 90s, and
Mhm.
I wasn't prepared for fame. I remember thinking, well, if I get an album out and I have a band around Boston, which is where Berkeley was and where I was going to living
Yeah,
at the time, I
yeah,
thought, well, that'll be pretty fun. I'll be like, yeah, a rocker chick in Boston, but I have classical train. It was just, that was
yeah.
kind of where I was thinking. I wasn't totally thinking worldwide, but I also have a lot of ambition,
Hmm.
and sometimes it's blind ambition. So I always knew from a very early age, even in Eugene, Oregon, that I was going to go to New York and do something big. So I guess I had that as my main guide. So when I was thrust into the, I guess I'll say the machine of
Hmm.
music business, that was an education that was kind of like a crash course.
Okay.
And I hadn't had the experience of honing my craft yet, or being a songwriter for a long time and really knowing my voice. Because as you said, I had all sorts of other interests in music.
Mm.
So
Yeah, yeah.
it it just threw me out into this limelight, which I loved it, but it was that one type of music, and it was very like, it was the 90s. It was, women were starting to be played on the radio, and strong women, and that was who I wanted to be at that moment. But I also knew, like, I have the violin and and I love jazz, and I want to
Yeah.
try all things. So I had to kind of be a part of that machine, which I learned is not always going to help you cultivate all of who you are as a
Mhm.
musician. It will
Okay.
just be like, well, you're this now. But we already have somebody like Alanis Morissette. So we can't, we have to like choose one or the other, not both. And so I found that to be very discouraging. And then I also felt, with music business and the way they treat women was quite frustrating. And I
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
to grapple with a lot of that stuff. And so the fame part, I would say I loved being recognized, and I loved when I moved people. Like for fans to come up to me and say that song changed my life, saved my life. I don't know, like that to me, or even that song made me want to have my child learn music. That to
Yeah.
me is all I really want. The fame is fun, but it after a while it's uncomfortable because my
Hmm.
ego got caught up in it, and I felt funny waiting in line for the bathroom at like a restaurant because I was insecure and I didn't know how to handle myself. They didn't actually know me, but they were coming up to me
Right.
and something they think who I am. So it was odd, and I got very uncomfortable with it.
Okay. Okay. Would you like to place your guitar back? I mean, are you comfortable? Make yourself comfortable. Yeah.
Wait, yeah, my arm will fall asleep if I don't. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Uh, so it's interesting, a lot of people kind of get tied to that rut, when fame kind of like comes to them at first, uh, they get stuck in that rut and they go chasing after it. They keep wanting more and more. It's very, I mean, you're very distinct when you say that you were feeling a bit awkward when people were coming to you and there were a lot of praises and things like that. So that's a very very unique perspective as to the whole idea of fame and popularity.
It's true. You want it until you don't, And
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
a lot of people get sucked into that.
correct.
Um, it's tempting. It's like that, I need more. And it is a little bit of like an ego drug. Like a lot of people get sucked
Yeah,
into it. If they don't have that and the accolades, then they feel less than, which is not who I'm going to be. I have a deeper sense of myself, and I'm not going to just rely on other people's, adulation. I love it, but I'm not going to rely
that's marvelous.
on
So
it.
do you consider yourself a role model for other female musicians?
Well, I've heard so. So I like that. I heard that from, well, I did a really cool project where I re-recorded my first album, The Burdens of Being Upright, and I modernized it and I called it Modern Burdens. And I asked other female artists, mostly from that era, but maybe some more modern people, to come
Hmm.
and sing my songs and make an album. And the responses that I got from these women who I respected, Tanya Donnelly and Rachel Yamagata, and so many more. They were like, "Oh my God, I love that album. That shaped me." And then I felt, well, coming from them,
Yeah,
that was a really nice feeling. Because
yeah.
in the '90s too, we were all pitted against each other too.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
this competitive, I never got compliments like that from fellow female artists.
Yeah, must have been a great sense of validation from other accomplished artists. You know, that's very nice. So your musical journey has been quite diverse, as you rightly mentioned. Uh, you were initially like in the classical space, and then you're a trained violinist and vocalist, and there was a transition later to being an alternative rock singer songwriter, right? So how has your classical background influenced your approach to writing and performing rock music?
Well, it's more like my the rebel spirit that I had and still have to not follow all of those restraints, those restrictions of
Yeah,
classical. Again, I am a fan, a huge fan, especially of like the romantic composers and the ones
yeah,
that make your heart just go. Ugh. But it was really the dynamic of me wanting to break away from all of that, structure. So It's not like I sat down at a piano or a guitar and said, well, I'm going to do something weird and quirky. And it was just more like of a letting go of all of the things that I'd learned. They're tools, they're there for me whenever. But I guess I'd have to say it was something for me to be pure about, something for me to be in the moment about. And that's a struggle, especially for a classical musician.
Yeah.
To not have that negative chatterbox up there and say, well, that was out of tune or that was weird, or you can't do that. I still have that, but I was really kind of challenging myself to not listen to those critical voices. Because then what kind of song am I going to write? It's going to be like, maybe somebody else's song, and that's not who I am. So I dug deep and allowed like whatever was in here and here from my history of music, which I feel is, kind of deep with my parents and everything, where I just kind of allowed it to happen.
Okay.
What's so fun, because I really do like quirky music too, and I love the Beatles so much.
Yeah.
And I also love, things that are just unique and authentic. That's my real thing. I like when I see a band or I hear music and it sounds really authentic and unique. I really like that a lot.
You did mention you are a fan of the Beatles, and I remember I read somewhere that you paid a tribute to Sir Paul McCartney on his 70th birthday with a beautiful rendition. So, would you like to speak a little bit about that particular collaboration?
Sure, that was a really great memory. I don't know how long ago it was, maybe even 10 years at this point, but there's a famous pop star in Denmark, and his name is Tim Christensen,
Mm-hmm.
and he has a band called the Damn Crystals. And
Okay.
he knew a close friend of mine named Mike Viola, who's also an amazing songwriter and performer. And Tim had told Mike, because I think they worked together, that he was a massive fan of mine. Okay. And so after a while, I got this phone call. I think it was probably from Mike via, Tim, saying that he wanted us both to fly to Denmark to be a part of this tribute live album and performance with, celebrating Sir Paul's birthday. And what I loved is the amount of time and care and meticulousness. Now, here's where I think meticulousness is okay, because it was just so fun. The band and everyone were really trying to emulate the Beatles and the songs and the sounds and the form. And I got to be Linda McCartney. So one of my favorite things, no offense to Linda McCartney at all, but on my favorite album is Ram. And when I listen to Ram and I listen to her background vocals, they're so cool and unique, but they're also out of tune. And so and I've grown up with that. So it's like, if it was in tune, it would sound off, it would sound wrong. So I got to test my ear and try to sing like Linda, which I'd go a little bit sharp on some notes. And that was my fun little like experiment, my private experiment. But yeah, there's so many beautiful songs that we performed, and I'm really proud of that. That was a great band.
Yeah. Your evolution as an artist has been described as riveting and complicated, right? So how do you feel your music has transformed over time, and what are the driving forces behind all of these changes?
The driving forces, and I guess me as an artist and a human being is kind of like the same thing. There's not like a divide. This is what I am, this is who I am, and what I do. I've always had this need to grow and learn, and I'm not, I think I grew up with a lot of challenges in learning who I truly was, because there was, a lot of other people that I felt I needed to take care of.
Okay.
Also really knew that there was something more to life than taking care of others. And then as I got older, I realized, like, in order to actually really take care of someone else or be there for someone else, you really have to know yourself and take care of yourself. So over these years and decades, that's really, I think, been my through line with my music. And I think that's why it sounds so intimate. And my life and the way I communicate with the world. As I'd said, I had a really hard time and still struggle with communicating, asking for things, standing up for myself. It seems contradictory to like the mother strong, girl
Yeah.
who's screaming, but that message in that song is the same thing. Inside I'm screaming. I don't know how to ask, and I'm afraid of conflict. I mean, I'm going to say most of my catalog kind of that. So I just use it as my, path forward.
Incredible. From whatever you said, you're a very unostentatious and frank person, right? From whatever you've spoken. Yeah, of course. Yeah, the music and all of this comes very natural, and you connect in a very, very different way with audiences. I mean, considering that you're not that comfortable sometimes, it's incredible to see that side of you also. How does spirituality inform your music?
I mean, I think it informs it quite a bit, without being too conscious of it. I try to go into this realm of openness. I wouldn't quite call it emptiness, but that's, I try to do that when I meditate, but just an openness to what is,
Mm-hmm.
and what I have inside or what's going on with me, and trying to direct it into a beautiful piece of music. So again, I'm so happy that I actually strove for that, because or strived, I don't know, because again, growing up with this classical confinement,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't allowed or able to do that. So I then became, I think I've always been somewhat of a spiritual person. My first endeavor and my first book was the Krishnamurti book. I can't remember what the name is. It could have been The Flame of Intention by Krishnamurti, or one of his books, but it changed my life, and I was probably 20.
Okay. I also read somewhere that you practice a lot of yoga. Do you?
I have. I wish I was doing that now. It's
Okay.
such a it's funny in this world now, because the world is busy and everyone's so busy, and an hour and a half of yoga is what I did all the time. And I even did a teacher's training, and I felt like, oh my God, yoga is like the greatest thing for all parts of us as a spirit and our body and our mind. And I was like so thankful I kind of lived and breathed yoga. But then, I had a child, or I adopted a child.
Okay. Lovely.
Started to tried to start a family, and then just life changed, So I tried to get back to it, but it's not as often.
You should visit the land of yoga. You should come down to India.
I know.
Yeah.
I've often wanted to. I really have. I
Yeah.
wish I could have that experience. So
You should totally. I'd be happy to host you in my country.
I would love that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna call the airlines right now.
Totally. Let me get in touch with your management and
Okay.
book you a couple of shows in my country.
Okay, that is amazing, and I would love to.
Yeah, let's do that. So let's talk a little bit about your songs. Quite fascinating. Sharks Can't Sleep is a very fascinating song for me on so many different levels. So can we start with the overt meaning?
Okay. Yeah, it's very clouded and veiled, and I intentionally tried to do that when I was writing my first album, because I, was trying stuff. But it is really about life and death, and the animal kingdom. They have a hierarchy, and there's a food chain and all of that, and there's no emotional thing about it. That's just how that works, and that's nature and wildlife. But then here we are as people who are more conscious. We have very conflicting feelings and ideas about just the the nature of life and death. And I think so many people are afraid of death, and I am too in a way, but a lot less so. And I think I tried to tie that in with also self-responsibility in how I treat people. So that's why probably you heard it was complex, because I also had, made mistakes in my life and ended relationships badly, and been irresponsible, and that's why it's like, and I just walked away. That kind of feeling, looking back and being like, wow, I wasn't, actually being very conscious at all.
After your second album, was it Downhill, your second album? Yeah. It kind of faced delays due to changes in the musical industry, and you went about making that significant decision to ask Island Records to end your contract, and you later on relocated to LA post that. Okay? Yeah. So after that, you put out yet another album, which was Blink the Brightest after that. So how did this experience reshape your strategy and approach to the music business and the songwriting process?
That was a big time, yeah. I believe it was right or just after 9/11. I had already, started facing what was really challenging for my second album. It was released 4 years later. And back in those days, you just need to keep releasing things. And I didn't make it in far enough to survive the change of what was popular, at least in the United States. Very different, where it was driven and anger and all of this stuff. That's like, I remember crying at a concert when I was seeing Radiohead, because I was crying for music, it was so sad. But so I'd already been very discouraged. My record label changed. All the people that had signed me from what was a boutique label, I wanted a boutique label with Tom Waits and PJ Harvey. I was going to be like the in crowd of the cool people. But it changed, and it got merged and bought and sold. And, Seagram's, the alcohol company, was an owner at one point. It was unrecognizable. My second album did not do well because nobody was paying attention anymore in such a short time. And I tried. I even kind of acquiesced to them by posing on the album cover, with my sass and my midriff showing. I didn't want that. I wanted to be more artistic, but I thought, okay, if they think it's going to help, why not? Turned out that didn't really work. And so I was dismayed right then and there. I couldn't even, I couldn't even get the attention of my manager at that point. And, and kind of like, oh, well, just wait until it's over kind of thing. So that didn't feel right. So and then September 11th happened. I was trying to record Blink the Brightest at that time in LA just as a visitor, and September 11th happened, and my friends were all back in Brooklyn. We all lived in Brooklyn Heights, which is part of Brooklyn that's directly across from the World Trade Center. Okay. My friends, I was recording actually. My friends, were back home. I couldn't reach them. It was devastating for a lot of people. So that affected me. Also, my mother, who's a wonderful survivor and wonderful woman, she was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh no.
And that was a hard hit because, she and I are incredibly close. So all of those things. Oh, and then I also got a divorce. I got a divorce from a really great guy, a drummer in the band called Soul Wax. And his name is Steve, and he's Belgian. And, that was a wonderful time, but it lasted 3 years. And I don't think it was actually realistic. And, I think we were different and the same in some ways, but I think it was built on the idea that, like, I'm always going to be flying to Paris, and we're always going to be like, getting VIP passes. I don't know. But anyway, so all of that stuff had just kind of happened all at once. And I do feel like it was a moment for me to reflect and go inward and realize, or ask myself, why am I doing this? Why am I writing songs? Why am I trying to release albums? What is it? And that's when I started to strip away actually the confinement that I felt in the music business. And all of those, pressures that I had that were completely not me. So I went deep into more emotions. Now, this was less anger, because I think my first two albums were anger driven. I'm okay with that now. I used to deny it all the time. But now I went into oh my God, a vulnerable place. And I only wanted to write from the heart. And so I started writing songs with this in mind, that my friends need help. We need help. You know, everybody has a light within them, and they need to remember that so we can get through something like this. And that's what and how my music and records started to change.
It's great. It's great to see how you've come such a long way through all of these hardships, but you've still managed to put out so many brilliant records over the years. And yeah, you've won a lot of hearts all over the world, you know, for the honest music that you've been trying to put out. So keep doing that.
Yeah, deal. I will.
On the contrary, your music also displays sharp and witty humor. And I've noticed that too. So how important do you think humor is in addressing serious issues through music?
For me, it's great. For me, it's my chance to kind of share sometimes the alternate way of viewing things. And I think that's very important. I think if people get really fixed on one thing, again, that's my whole, I guess that's my journey. And not take a step back and look at it and lighten up about it. I think that's going to be a challenge for most people who cannot do that. And one of the things I love is taking that step back and being objective about something that just happened or happened a long time ago. Maybe you're in therapy and you're dealing with it, but you can look at it from outside of yourself, because really all you are these, you know, thoughts and the ego and the projections and all of these things that we carry around with us from very early childhood all the way up. And we hopefully become conscious beings, but not everyone does. Not everyone can, and that's okay. They'll probably have another chance or something. But
yeah,
I think the laughter and the levity is important in all areas of life, as long as you still have the discipline. You know, I still have that discipline to write the best song I can and to practice, but you know, taking a stab at something or goofing around, or you know, doing something where it's a bit slightly off, and maybe it, you know, it just makes you think or makes you laugh and think, or maybe you hear it and it sounds funny, but you don't even know why. I think that's really, really fun.
Do you feel that you've received due credit for your contributions to modern music?
No.
Why is that? Why do you feel there's that void?
Okay. Yeah, I you know, due credit's like hard to even know what I am due, but I guess I go back to that moment where my second album tanked. And, you know, I'd been very naive before that. And I thought, wow, I'm going to be able to release albums that are quirky and me and, you know, authentic forever now. So I think that was a really big blow, because I realized, like, if I want to keep continuing to be myself in my writing and my life and my music, I was going to have to step out of the mainstream, and I was going to have to stop really striving and caring for that, and just hope that maybe I would get the credit that I feel I deserve from my authenticity. And unfortunately, like, you know, these days and the world and how many other artists there are and varying talents, and you know, music has become somewhat, you know, secondary to, or third, or you know, all the way down to not important. And that does make me feel frustrated, because I want music to inspire everyone, but I can't change that. And I also read comments sometimes that make me feel great, but also frustrate me, where I hear, you know, the most underrated artist, or, you know, not the most, but you know what I mean, completely underrated and not receiving, you know, the kind of credit. But that's the thing I struggle with, and then that's the thing that makes me strive to be even more authentic, because how am I gonna really change that? The music business is not my friend anymore, and that's okay. I've got other ways now.
So stepping out of the mainstream must have been a very hard decision for you. So how do you, at this point, I'm sure you would have probably revised your strategy being on your own. So how do you usually go about balancing fan expectations for a new release based on your artistic learnings?
Yeah, I've battled with that every single, well, after my hit,
Mhm.
Mother, and after the success of The Burdens of Being Upright, I would sit down to write a song or a new album or something, and I had this pressure. I didn't know. I thought, oh God, I've got to please my fans who love that angst and who love the edgy and the powerful. I got to please them. I'm also this, but I like this and this, and it was a lot of mental exhaustion, and it
Mhm.
did affect that feeling I was describing before, where I was like open to me and the world and universe. It was more like, oh my God, I'm still dealing with that box that I had allowed myself to fit in. And so the writing was painful for a while. And then the
Okay.
writing became like second album, the writing became about how painful, in a way. It was like, it was a lot of songs angry at the music business or to, stealing my soul, being dramatic about it. But, or, my manager, you know, ignoring me or, a lot of the misogyny in the world. And I was writing songs to explain what was going on in my inner world there. And then eventually, like we talked about it at Blink the Brightest, I just started to kind of clear that stuff and I found what was important.
What was the songwriting process like? I mean, I'm sure it differs from song to song, but what is your process?
I think I don't really have a process,
Mhm.
one process at least. Um, it started out the simple, challenge of writing the 3-chord song and with the guitar, which is not a familiar instrument. That, and then the violin, sometimes I'd hear a melody and then I'd start with that and then I'd write a song around it. Um, I would dream songs in my head, melody first, but that was more challenging.
Yeah.
I really liked to do the thing where I'd lay down, the chords, and then it became piano, where I'd lay down the stuff that sounded good to me, where my fingers wanted to go, and then let a melody come from there. That's where I started to feel like it was a bit more spiritual. But then also like I'd grab a bass and I mean, I know how to play bass, but very rudimentary. And a bass line would inspire me, or it would be the most basic, simple bass line, but I found this cool note and it was only one note that rode over it. And it wasn't about technique or any kind of like music. What do I say? It was kind of musicality that was more about vibe and cool sounding. I'd often go into a cafe or something, especially in New York City, and I would say, what would I want to hear in this room right now by someone? Maybe me, maybe it's someone else, where I'd go, what's that?
Hmm.
And that was a big inspiration. Space always can do that for me.
And how do you go about channeling these ideas? Like you said, an idea would just pop out of nowhere. How do you go about documenting it? How do you go about, do you write it down or what do you do?
Well, this is where I'm so grateful to have the classical training, because if I'm on subway and I don't have my journal or something, I will then remember this idea that I had. If it's worth remembering, I will find the solfege, the scale notes, the solfege, to remember it. And I might have to I write my hand sometimes or an envelope, if it's there and I can't forget it or I don't want to, I would write down the notes in solfege.
Mhm.
I might even, like, if I do have paper, I'll write up the staff and I'll draw the intervals and the rhythms, just so when I get home and I've already had a day, I'll look at that and be like, oh, I remember that. Oh, that's great. Or, oh, that's not great. And so I love music theory and ear training for that very purpose. It's probably been the best tool for me in my entire musical life.
Incredible. On 16th March, I believe it's your birthday, right? You put out Too Deep for the Shallow Pocket
Right.
around that time. which is one of your latest releases, which is such a high energy, uplifting track that would make me dance the night away at a club in Bangalore, for sure. So, how does the new music reflect your personality as an individual?
Well, I've become less precious about everything. So, like what I was describing before, of like, oh, I've got to please these fans, and I got to be true to this and that. What really helped me become less precious was this album, Modern Burdens, which was the restylings of Burdens of Being Upright. It was originally supposed to be an exact re-record of the Burdens of Being Upright, because artists sometimes are not able to keep their master recordings and sit there on the shelf, and nobody can generate money from it. And so I'm sitting here without any kind of income from that. So they tend to do that, every single guitar tone and everything. But after trying that, I was like, I've already done this, and it wasn't really truly about the money. It's probably a very dumb business move. And also, I have time to do that for real. But my spirit came out again, and I was like, no, these songs have got to open up, and they've got to be different. And let the producer I had, John Waszewski, was just so good at I don't know, he was so creative. He could play almost anything, and he'd try stuff, and I'd be like, the first moment would be like, oh, what? I don't know, because it's kind of not, it's a little bit. And then I'd be like, you know what? I already wrote these songs, and they already were successful, so I don't even have to worry about whether this is going to be successful. I was like, letting go of the reins, and that taught me a lot. That process was like really valuable.
Yeah, that song is one hell of a song. It just gets me in such a happy mood when I listen to it. I just feel like going out and partying in a dance club. That's what I feel.
So. I hope people do. I mean, I'll get that song is a one-off. It's a single that was recorded and produced in that same time of Modern Burdens. So yeah, it was one of those songs that was just like, let's just have fun and not analyze everything.
Is there going to be some kind of new music coming out? What's going on in terms of projects?
I have some really, really beautiful songs that I'm really excited about, and they are more of the emotional, vulnerable stuff. Starting with, a lot of pain and disappointment with my marriage was a very big challenge. Now I married the editor of Rolling Stone magazine, Jason Fine, who's a wonderful man, but there was just so much difficulty and disparity in our lives. He was a big executive, publisher, editor of a big, huge magazine, and here I was, still kind of a struggling artist, and our differences were painful after a while. And I did the same thing I was doing, where I was trying to be somebody else. So I wrote more from that place of like trying to, again, extricate that. What is it? And be centered. And these songs are gorgeous also because I've entered the classical influences with my violin or piano training into the songs. And now I have a beautiful bass player partner, musical partner and life partner who encouraged me to be all me. Classical influences, jazz. He's a jazz upright bassist.
Oh, lovely.
It is. It's great. And the commonality that we share with like loving of harmonies and rearrangements, and he's sharing the Melodeon business, with me, where we're trying to get younger people to have these kinds of tools that are not necessarily the by the book. So sorry, I do veer, but the new songs have all of that expression, and I'm so excited. In fact, I'm playing a lot of these songs with my trio for a ballet.
Oh,
and
lovely.
Very cinematic and ballet-like. So that's kind of where I'm going. I'm so excited.
I'm excited too. I can't wait to hear them.
Thank you.
And I'm so for sure. And I'm so glad you're in a much better place. You have such an incredible musical partner who's helping out with your musical endeavor. I'm really happy for you.
Thank you. That's amazing to hear. Thank you.
You did speak about the Melodeon curriculum a couple of times. So it seems to emphasize both the educational and emotional aspects of music, from what I've gathered. So, how do you strike a balance between teaching music theory and harmony while also encouraging empathy and self awareness among these young learners?
You're good. Yeah, because this is really what it's all about. And I find that there's a serious lack just in general for young people to find ways to explore themselves. And I just feel like music is the path, that I found ways to
Hmm.
explore myself. So uh so what I do is I write songs that will be a little bit covert in the lessons. I grew up with TV shows when I was young, and I watched them with my mother. They were Sesame Street
Hmm.
and other PBS, like public broadcasting shows, not like the big commercial stuff that's out now, but just educational, using music and using humor. That's kind of probably where I got all of that. So I will write a song that has, for instance, there's a song called All the Blackbirds on
Hmm.
my album, and on the Melodeon Music
Yeah.
House album. It's literally singing the fingerings of the how you would actually play the song. So what I
Okay.
found is that this beautiful song that sounds like a folk song, and I'm sure I probably, borrowed a little bit here and there from old time songs, but it's the black keys of the piano, 2 and 3. There's a pattern on a piano, right? 2, 3, 2,
Yeah.
3,
Yeah.
black. Well, I actually I taught, sorry, uh, piano to young kids, and I thought, wow, if they can visualize something else rather than these like little bars going down the keys, they're blackbirds. And then, because you want the kid to use the imagination. And so then they can look at the keyboard and pretend they're little blackbirds sitting in groups of 2,
Mm.
groups of 3. And then there's your pentatonic scale for those of you, and so the finger actually, I don't know if I'm backwards to you or not, but
Yeah.
the melody like 4, 5, 3, 2, 1, 4, 5, 3, 5, 5, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And I've taught children, like I've seen it firsthand. They just, and also I have to say that when you play the black keys, if you play any song, any key together, it sounds good. It's not going to be discouraging. So that's another way to get kids actually feeling like they have an accomplishment.
And how receptive are people in America, at least in schools and the younger crowd, in terms of adapting to this program? Do you see a lot of schools enrolling themselves to this curriculum? And how is this bundling strategy working out for you?
Well, it is very beginning still. It was really kind of born during COVID, like probably the first days. No, actually, it's not true. I've been building and writing these songs and coming up with these ideas for a long time. But when COVID hit, and Rene and I, he's my partner and bassist, we were on the plane home, and everyone was, actually, it was an empty plane, and there was a couple people with masks, and we were thinking, what's happening? I don't think we're going to be doing Tracy Bonham tours much for a while. So that's when I said, I have this stuff. You want to work on it? And I already knew he'd be the good partner, because we just have this like musical moment in the moment kind of thing. Um, so it's very beginning. We're still working on video content.
Hmm.
Just the 2 of us. We started with his eldest child, who helped us build the website and some of the
Oh, lovely.
visuals.
Okay.
They were amazing. Now they're off to, live their life at 20, 21 or something. So Rene and I are the only ones doing this. And I do the music mostly, and he does the music and the education and all that and the curriculum ideas. But we're just like 2 people, and he's made the videos for us. And
Okay.
I don't even know what he just did. He's done all of this stuff, and he's saying he's just figuring it out by pushing buttons. So at some point, what I hope is that we get some kind of funding, because it's going to cost money to have people who know how to do stuff. So we're
Correct.
not new. And then it's going to build into something where we have a package, to show
Yeah. Yeah.
private schools. Maybe they'll get into it, because
Yeah.
they get
Yeah.
the money. Public schools, hopefully, and I hope it'll change the idea of music education to be more about empowering yourself and finding your own voice and the music in your heart.
I really regret the fact that I didn't have a teacher or a program like this when I was a little boy. I could have learned a lot more music.
That is what I'm talking about, because
Yeah.
I had people come up to me saying exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And when I look back, I had great teachers and I had inspiring teachers and I had my mom and my grandpa. So I had it. I had all of the things offered to me. So lucky. And I think that everyone, if they could, it would be fantastic. And it doesn't even mean they have to be a professional, accomplished musician, because we know that music is actually a way of communicating. And that's been my, that's it. If other people had hard times communicating or finding themselves, music could actually, I think, could actually help them.
At least in India, I've not come across anything like this. And this would be great for a lot of young children out here in India too, to sort of try out the Melodeon curriculum. Yeah.
I got into that a lot, and I listened to a lot. And I don't know, like, is it the same way where that old traditional stuff, was it really rigid? Did you have to do it one way and not the other?
In India, a lot of emphasis is given to classical musical traditions. So a lot of young kids get into that whole rigid, conventional thing, following the, I wouldn't say books, but following the transmission which is given by your teacher. So they become clones of the teacher.
And I don't want to stir anything up over there, but I kind of do. Yeah. I mean, I want to respect any tradition, and I don't, I don't have any grounds to say that, that classical Indian music, the tradition needs to be busted up. But as we enter into a more modern world, what I'm trying to do is really keep that, the discipline, the practice,
foundation,
and the ability to articulate it, but also start to realize that there's more of you to express within that.
That'll be a good way to look at it, and at least maybe if something like this were to be normalized in India, we'll see a lot of interesting musicians coming in the next couple of years too. Yeah,
and I know, because I have seen it and I experienced it, and I'm even doing this to my son. I'm like, music, or I have a hard time with these young people's music today. I know that happens in probably every single example of that. But young people are our future.
For sure. In the interest of time, I'd like to come to the last part of our agenda, which is a fun segment, which is the rapid fire segment. And I'll be asking you some very short questions, but interesting ones. You will not be disappointed.
Okay, I hope.
So first question for you, Tracy. What is that one song that always makes you cry?
That I've written, or anything?
Anything in general.
Okay, I got it. I just know it. There's a classical composer by the name of Edvard Elgar. And he wrote, he's not a household name. He's not like Beethoven or Ravel or Debussy, but he wrote this piece called the Enigma Variations. And there's a variation in there. I can't remember which movement it is in that piece, but it's called Nimrod. And it's very much like the Barber Adagio for strings, where it starts slowly and then it builds. So in Nimrod, it's like quiet, and then it just is so beautiful. It reminds me of a moment I had playing that within a symphony orchestra, where I felt like, oh my God, I'm part of something so beautiful. So it really gets me in a good way.
On the contrary, what is your favorite guilty pleasure song?
Love disco. I love "Can you give me nuts?" I just, I'm not even ashamed of any of that anymore. I love it all.
Right. What are the top 5 must-haves for any singer-songwriter to get started with?
Let's start with Okay, must-haves. I will say this, I feel like this has been the biggest help. An instrument, like I think a piano, because for me personally, it's just so much easier to that's your support, because chords and melody for me are very important. But I think the other thing is that, one, in order to be a really authentic artist and songwriter, is to have that openness of being vulnerable and not having to adhere to the rules and the confines of songwriting structure or what you think you're supposed to be doing.
Right. So if you could put together an all-star alternative rock meets pop band, who would be part of it?
Well, guess what? I have it. I mean, I love a lot of, amazing musicians that are well known and all that, or proficient, but I have two people right now. It's Rene bass, but also this wonderful drummer named Alvester Garnett.
Okay.
They're both jazz players, but they they can be amorphous at times. Not only is their musicianship like off the hook, like I'm learning so much from them, but here's what I really love about these two, and I haven't found this in probably any band formation that I've had, and I've had a lot, is that I think it's a jazz thing, but I also think it's their personal thing together. They listen, and I'm not just talking about like, oh, what's happening in the room. They're listening and paying attention and supporting. In the rock world, I hate to say it, playing all over me or determining, what happens in a song. And I've been known to acquiesce because that's kind of how I've been brought up. And then I find myself thinking, wait a minute, whose band is this? And Rene was the first one to say in that situation, he's like, nobody's listening to you. And it, unfortunately, it was a male, pretty much all male all the time with me. And there's that dynamic of like, step aside, lady. And so finally I had these two beautiful people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lovely. I have one last question. Down in the distant horizon, what would you like to be remembered as?
What I'd like to be remembered as. Someone who inspires people to find the music in their heart.
Marvelous. Great. Such a great answer for a closure. This interview will be additionally aired on Big FM Shillong and Aizawl, two incredible radio stations in the northeastern part of India. And it'll be out on all major audio streaming platforms, which is Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, name it. So I'll be sure to share the link once the interview is out. And yeah, it's been an incredible blessing, honor, and a privilege. Tracy, thank you so much for joining in. And I hope you enjoyed being on the show.
I really did. I knew it from the start when I watched your show. I was like, oh, this is going to be fun because you ask the questions. It's great.
Thank you. Means a lot coming from you. Please do stay in touch. I'd love to hear more music from you. Yeah, and sorry?
Coming to India, right?
Yeah, you're also coming to India. Yeah. So let's make that happen. Let me know what works for you, and then I'd be happy to organize something for you in India. I'd love to talk to your management and see what fits in well for you. Yeah.
Love it. I would love to. Thank you.
Let's do that. So take care. Have a great Saturday and have a great weekend, and enjoy yourself at Woodstock.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Take care.